Hello and a very warm welcome to the programme. United we stand against China. The message from Japan, India, Australia and the US, what's known as the Quad, is that together we can push back against Chinese adventurism in the Indo-Pacific region. Is it really necessary? You're watching Roundtable. Well, this informal group, the Quad, has been around for some time, but there now appears to be a new determination to confront China. What is the real reason? Tokyo was the recent venue for only the second ever meeting of the Quad nations' foreign ministers. Despite the pandemic, it was face to face, a sign perhaps of the importance being placed on this emerging group. The four countries all share the common challenge of deteriorating relations with China on issues from the economy to foreign policy, even border disputes. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo accused China's governing Communist Party of what he called exploitation, corruption, and coercion. Meanwhile, China condemned what it called exclusive cliques, targeting third parties. So is the Quad a new rival that is making China take notice? Very pleased to say that we can welcome to Roundtable out of New Delhi, the Indian capital, Jagannath Panda, Research Fellow and Centre Coordinator for East Asia at the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defence Studies and Analyses. We go to Hong Kong, where we say hello to Francis Lun, Chief Exec of GEO Securities. And in London, we welcome back Humphrey Hawksley, who recently saw published an expanded and revised edition of Asian Waters, the struggle over the Indo-Pacific and the challenge to American power, also a former BBC Asia correspondent. Great to have you on the programme. Humphrey, here's your book, and in it and in other articles, you articulate the view that the West's appreciation of China has changed from being a great place to do business to what?
Yes, and I keep changing my own view, I have to say, over the past 2 years. I mean, if we go back to the financial crisis, say 2009, 2010, certainly here in Europe, China was seen as this treasure chest of investment that could buy our ports, invest in our nuclear power stations, and all the rest of it. That has changed. The change has essentially been led by the Donald Trump trade war, but also by China's pushing forward in a number of areas. I mean, we've had in the past few months the Xinjiang camps with the Uyghurs, the Muslim Uyghurs there being retrained, re-educated, concentration camps, whatever you want to call it. We've had the scuffles on the Indian-China border, which don't portend very good. The South China Sea issues, where the military bases, technically illegal, built out of islands on one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. We've got Hong Kong, where the one China, two systems thing seems to have fractured a lot there, human rights being issued there. What does the West do about all this? Well, you can't just say it's going to be business as usual. So basically, we're now looking at this situation where the US is leading an alliance of new nations, not new nations, a new alliance of nations, fundamentally free market democratic, but not necessarily that. They call them like-minded nations that are being put together simply to stop or contain or balance China's rise.
Let's go to Jagannath and ask what in particular, other than the border disputes, and we may come on to those a little bit later, what in particular is India concerned about with regard to China?
A number of issues. If we see, of course, border is one issue, where we have seen a number of Chinese military activism across the border, India-China border regions, be it in the western sector, middle sector, or in the eastern sector. But more than that, what we have been watching and which is really worrisome is China's continuous adventurism in the Indian Ocean, the provocative behavior in the South China Sea, trying to interfere in India's peaceful neighborhood and trying to pitch each on one of India's neighbor against India. There are two significant development has happened. When we are actually talking about the Indo-Pacific narrative, when we are talking about the Quad narrative in Indo-Pacific, the Chinese have tried to consolidate their immediate neighborhood, and there is a Quad they have formulated, that is China, Nepal, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, and that significantly poses a concern for India. Similarly, if we try to see, Chinese have created through Doklam incident a divide between India and Bhutan, which is a politically confident partner of India for a long, long time. So the Chinese have created a division between India and its neighbors, not only in the immediate neighborhood, but also in the wider Indo-Pacific regions. The number two main concern for India.
So sorry. I just want to bring in at this point, and I will give you the chance to make your other thoughts known in just a moment. But the Chief of Indian Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat, well, he had a few words to say. This was shortly after the agreement, the Comcast agreement with the United States, which was a sharing of defence technologies and strategic planning. But he had this to say at the US-India Strategic Partnership online forum just last month.
We are very keen to ensure that there is complete freedom of navigation on the seas and then the airspace above. And as far as the Quad is concerned, we feel that this is a good arrangement which will ensure that the Indian Ocean region and all other oceans around, there is complete freedom of navigation without fear of any other nation singularly trying to dominate.
So, Jagannath, is he suggesting there is always going to be a military element to this?
Yes, of course, there is a military element. In fact, if you see, there is a continuous Chinese maritime adventurism in Indo-Pacific, particularly in the Indian Ocean regions. That is coming even, in fact, as a bigger concern for India. And if we see, this is what encouraging India to align with the like-minded countries, be it US, be it Japan, be it Australia, to go for specific military-specific arrangements or agreement. And therefore, what we saw that India signing a lot of defense agreements, which is logistical arrangements with the Quad countries. And there we have a robust partnership, defense partnership with the US. Today we have a AXA agreement with Japan. We have a military arrangement, logistical arrangement, understanding with Australia. And this is a new facet of Indian foreign policy. And all of these things is happening, keeping in the China's activism, not only in the Indian Ocean regions, but also on the border front. The Chinese activism.
Can I go to Francis? Can I go to Francis
Yes.
at this stage, Jagannath? Thanks very much indeed. Other than describing Mike Pompeo's statement about the necessity of the Quad as absolute nonsense, what does China really make of this development, the strengthening of these four nations' ties?
Well, actually, even inside China, among the Communist Party members, there are dissenting voices criticizing Xi Jinping for taking this lone wolf strategy, because Chinese foreign policy has been keeping a low profile since the day of Deng Xiaoping. And I think Jiang Zemin and also Hu Jintao for the past more than 20 years followed that policy, try to make friends with the US in particular, and try to be friends with everyone and concentrate on economic development. But things changed after Xi Jinping became the chairman. He is much more assertive, and he wants to go back to the Mao Zedong way of doing things. He wanted personal worship, but somebody stopped him. But in terms of foreign policy, he is much more assertive, and using this so-called lone wolf strategy that created enemies all around.
So let me get this clear, Francis. This was a deliberate strategy to expand outside, to change the direction of foreign policy and risk antagonizing neighbors and indeed the United States.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, since the days of Deng Xiaoping, actually, China has been trying to be good friends with the US. Don't forget, people don't understand that the USA saved China twice during the 20th century. During the Second World War, saved China from Japanese occupation. And then in 1969, saved China from nuclear bombs from the Soviet Union, from Brezhnev. And that's why when Nixon went to China in 1972, and China was really happy to receive him. And it's very unfortunate that Donald Trump is violently anti-China, and so is Pompeo. The two of them will put up this anti-China alliance, which is the most. This is the most dangerous move against
Can
world
I ask
peace.
Humphrey, Francis, if I may stop you for just a moment? Humphrey, why would the Chinese authorities do this if they knew that it risked antagonizing powerful former friends such as the United States and near neighbors,
the reason
Japan,
is
etc.?
that
This is for Francis. Sorry, Francis. This is for Humphrey, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think what we just heard from Francis is right, is that China made the first move in this chess game that's going on at the moment by essentially moving into the South China Sea in 2012 during the Obama years. I mean, what's difficult to fathom now also that we heard from Francis is why it's continuing. Because we've heard all the flashpoints that there are around. We've heard that there's dissent against Xi Jinping's sort of Maoist type almost push forward, yet China can't win. It doesn't control the world's economy like America does. It can't decouple or deintegrate from its reliance on the United States. And I mean, for example, just to give an example, the Huawei telephone that's been so much in the news, 30% of the components of that is made in the United States. So both of these countries need each other. But also, I think...
Can we move on to perhaps, sorry to butt in, can we move on perhaps to what the Quad hopes to do and what it can actually do? Humphrey, you continue, please, if you will.
Yeah, great minds think alike, David. I was just about to say is that I think that what the US can do, or US-led, is that they know how to build lasting, sophisticated military and strategic alliances, and China doesn't know how to do that. So the Quad, which has been around since 2007, is getting a new burst of energy simply because China is around. But if you couple that with everything else that is happening, Britain, for example, with its Brexit thing, is sort of moving into the Indo-Pacific as well, as is France, militarily and strategically. China doesn't have those networks that the Western democracies have. It doesn't know how to build the coalitions of the willing. And if you look at the array of governments that are beginning to be positioned against China's rise, or at least to balance China's rise, you can't see any way that Xi Jinping and his Belt and Road Initiative and juggernaut of pushing forward is going to succeed.
Okay, so let's go to Jagannath on that. As one member of the Quad, India hopes that the grouping will be able to put pressure on China, but in what way?
A number of ways actually India can build pressure on China. If we try to understand over the last 1 decade or so, there was absolutely no mechanisms which could create a pressure on China. And hence what we saw, the Chinese went ahead in creating massive infrastructure across the Indo-Pacific regions. Last 15 years, they have gone in establishing more than 25 military points, maritime points across the Indian Ocean regions. Today, we have a mechanism called Quad, which is going to provide a security to the region. So Quad comes as a mechanism which is a security provider mechanism. Second, the way the Tokyo summit has happened recently, if you see, there is a process of institutionalizing the Quad process has happened. And with that, what happens is that the middle powers or the lower ranked countries who are democratic countries, they get an umbrella to hide their interest under that umbrella, and this is what Quad is going to provide. Third is, which is the significant aspect, is that Quad is going to also provide a maritime confidence among the countries who primarily believes on freedom of navigation, on freedom of movement, and most importantly, those who believe in free and open Indo-Pacific regions. It's a democratic principle ideas. It's a mechanisms of democratic ideas against authoritarian principles, authoritarian functioning. And this is what Quad wants to achieve. Not necessarily.
Okay, so I'm wondering what China thinks might happen next, because Hua Chunying from China Foreign Ministry had this to say: we're living in an era of globalization. The interests of all the countries are so intertwined that organizing closed and exclusive cliques will not help to build mutual trust and cooperation. Francis, what do you think China can do about this?
Well, China's been surrounded by this military alliance. I don't think anything that China can do will ameliorate the threat. And actually, this Quad, as I said, is really the biggest threat to world peace. I think what the U.S. is doing is trying to encircle China, and in doing so, it actually pushed China into the embrace of Russia, the former Soviet Union. And this is exactly what Nixon tried not to do in 1972, because the US needed a counterbalance against the Soviet Union. And now Donald Trump.
Okay, so I'm going to push you on this one. So what will it take? You talk about this. You talk about this being a massive threat to world peace. What could possibly bring about the two sides in this argument clashing militarily?
Well, the dangerous point is India and China, because what we have now is a nationalist government. They play on the nationalism of India. That is a very dangerous game. Actually, during Deng Xiaoping's era, he offered to establish a final border between China and India across the line of control. Don't forget, in 1962, China beat India and could have occupied Assam, but China decided to withdraw the troops. So I think.
So Jagannath, what Francis is saying is that the border clash between China and India that goes back a long way, but has basically been bubbling up since the middle of the summer, is a serious flashpoint. Is India well aware of that?
Yes, very much. In fact, India was ready to work with China, and the narrative of developmental partnership, both Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping started, formulating in 2013 onwards. But that didn't really work out today with China's aggressiveness in the Galwan Valley, and also previously 2 years back in the Doklam region. But today, what we are anticipating a surprising Chinese adventurism in Indo-Pacific, in bordering regions, and there I think Quad might come into play, particularly a partner like US, which could provide intelligence sharing, assistance,
exactly. So detail what help India would expect from the Quad if the border dispute escalates. You mentioned intelligence sharing. What other areas?
A number of issues: intelligence sharing, technological assistance, military equipment assistance, and also what is more important is to create a favorable international environment in India's favor, questioning China's activities. And also, we should not underestimate the China-Pakistan calculus. I think Quad can play a significant role, particularly the significant powers like US. They can create a pressure on Pakistan to also have a dialogue with China. So I think Quad can come into play in a number of ways, from building confidence internationally, India as a peace-loving and democratic countries, questioning China's activities, and trying to also create pressure over China not to go for a war path, and as a P5 nation to respect international laws. And
okay, I understand that, but you've outlined what you hope, or what India hopes the Quad might be able to do. Let's broaden it out a little bit. Humphrey, let me bring in Japan and Australia, and then we'll get on to the NATO suggestions from China about this alliance. What do Australia and Japan get out of this?
Well, they get an enhanced security alliance. and they get shared common ground, and that they're both pushing back against China's advance. I mean, one of the latest developments, David, is that it's quite likely that Japan might join this Five Eyes intelligence gathering network that until now has been the Western democratic powers of the US, Canada, Britain, New Zealand, and Australia. Now, if Japan joins that, that is quite a formidable military intelligence force to set against China. And in Australia, you've basically got a European Western-minded country there sitting in the middle of Asia. So that's useful for everybody, for them to get the US, Britain, and others on side there, and also for them to feel that their values and their pushback against China has got a kind of alliance. So I think that when you're talking about, there's a lot of talk about this, a new Cold War, which I don't think is that helpful, but it is a separation of two ideologies. And if you read the Communist Party tracts by Xi Jinping, it is to ensure that the Communist Party socialist ideology supersedes that of the Western capitalist free market.
Let me ask you this, if I may. China has its own similar sort of alliance. I think it's Nepal, Pakistan, Afghanistan. It is nothing like as powerful as this. And if, as you say, Japan joins the Five Eyes, well, that makes a bigger grouping. There is something else that's being mentioned, which is Quad Plus, and that would involve the four countries we know of, New Zealand, South Korea, and possibly Vietnam, all coming together in this massive alliance. Is there something in what China is suggesting when it says this is, and I've got it written down here, this could be an Indo-Pacific NATO?
Yes, very much so. In fact, at the Quad meeting where Mike Pompeo was lambasted so much against China there and showed the cohesion there, there were commentators talking about a NATO of the Indo-Pacific. And it has been talked about. It was even tried back in the 1960s with Seattle, which didn't work. I mean, what's happened so far, whilst all this has been bubbling on, is that you have the ASEAN, the Southeast Asian grouping of 10 nations, but they quite sensibly haven't tried to punch above the parapet, as it were, because they knew that they would fall apart like that. You have problems, say, between Japan and South Korea. They don't have a defense alliance between themselves because of historical differences, a little bit like if France and Germany had failed to do that in Europe. So you still have got, say, Japan, the US and Australia are trying now to forge this united front of what they call a free and open Pacific of like-minded countries in order to put China into check. Now, this is going to be many, many years in the making. But what's happened in the past couple of years, or even the past few months, is that it's been galvanized into a process precisely because China has been pushing out as it has been.
Okay, let's go to Francis. We're coming towards the end of the program. I found it fascinating. Thank you in advance, very much indeed. Francis, what is China going to do about this?
Well, what the U.S. did really leaves China has only one choice: to be friends with Russia. That's already happened, and China will build the alliances, like you said, with Pakistan and other countries around the world. So you will have two separate groupings, like what you have in Europe, Russia against the rest of Europe, and then in Asia you have China against the rest of Asia, except Pakistan and several other countries. So you have a new Cold War building up. I think it is really due to Donald Trump.
And very dangerous, possibly too, because we're talking about in this grouping Russia, China, Pakistan, India, the United States, all nuclear armed powers.
Yeah, that's the dangerous part, because any miscalculation, especially by India, will ignite a nuclear war that could mean the end of the world.
And China believes that just by reaching out, it can end this, it can diffuse the situation. Perhaps it's gone too far.
Well, it was India who refused the olive branch offered by China to end the border dispute, but India refused to accept it.
Francis, would a new president change things in the United States?
I hope so. I hope somebody who's more rational than Donald Trump.
Listen, thank you. Yeah, quickly, yeah.
I just want to say that the thing about China and Russia coming together is going to be very difficult for India because Russia supplies a lot of India's armaments. So it's not really that simple. And the other quick point I'd like to make is that if China wants to be the power in Asia, which it does, then Asia has to feel safe. It can't be a power by suppressing a lot of other countries into being vassal states. India has to feel safe. Japan has to feel safe. Taiwan, Hong Kong, Vietnam, all these places have to feel safe if it's going to be the main power in Asia. If they don't feel safe, they're going to go to the US and other powers to try to balance China off.
Listen, thank you very much indeed. From London, from Hong Kong, from New Delhi, we've had all sorts of different points of view. Your time is very much appreciated, as is your time, wherever you happen to be watching this. From me, David Foster, and the Roundtable team. Until next time, when we hope once again you'll be able to join us. Goodbye.